Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you all so very much for joining us today. My name is Brian Cradish with the Harris County Public Library, and I'm very excited to be here for another Texas A&M AgriLife Extension program with the Harris County Master Gardeners. Our programs are every third Tuesday at 11 o'clock a.m., and today's program will be Plumerias in Your Garden. Before we start, just a couple of quick housekeeping. You can view us on Facebook, is where you're probably at now, but we're also broadcasting live to YouTube. So if you'd like to find us on our YouTube channel, you can find us there. For our program today, we invite you all to share the page, like the program, and most importantly, please ask questions and comments in the comment portion of Facebook so that we can hear what's going on. We love to know where you're viewing us from. And what questions you have for our Master Gardeners. So today we will be joined by Master Gardener Seal Dow and talking about Plumerias. And I'm going to go ahead and bring Seal on right now. Seal, good morning. How are you doing?
Good.
Excellent. So I'm going to let you take it away and just let me know when you're ready for some questions.
Okay.
So you're all good to go ahead and jump on in.
Yes. Brian, next.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I didn't know you were ready for the next slide. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, sure.
There we go. Perfect. And this is just our green thumb gardening series. So there we go. And right. Then yeah, I've got you on the back end here. So let me know when you're ready for the next slide.
Next. Welcome to growing plumerias in your garden. Next. Plumerias are native to the Yucatan area of Mexico, Central America. Let me just try to get that up there. Plumerias are native to the Yucatan area of Mexico, Central America, the northern parts of South America, and all the islands of the Caribbean. The first known description of plumeria was found in the Bandianas manuscript in 1522. It is a beautifully colored illustrated book describing native herbs and their uses, both in the Aztec language and in Latin. And you can actually find images of this book on Google. Next. The genus Plumeria is named after the famous French Franciscan monk and botanist Charles Plumier. During the period of 1689 to 1697, King Louis XIV of France commissioned him to make 3 botanical expeditions to the Caribbean. When he returned, Plumier published many manuscripts that were beautifully illustrated and very detailed. He was considered one of the most important botanical explorer of his time. To honor him, his colleagues named a group of plants native to the Caribbean after him, the Plumeria. But he was not the first one to have discovered the species. 100 years earlier, a Spanish priest named Francisco de Mendoza described how the plumerias were used in the Aztec culture. Back then, they would if you had an injury, severe injury, and to close the wound, they would brush the plumeria sap across the wound, place cotton on it, and then bandage it. They also used it in case you had faint of heart and you needed a little courage. They would drip the milky sap into a concoction beverage, and you would drink it, and you would have courage to go and fight. Next. The common name for plumeria is frangipani. Legend has it that when European settlers came to the area and smelled the plumeria fragrance, it reminded them of a perfume back home called frangipani. The popular almond-scented perfume was created by a 16th century nobleman named Marquis Muzio Frangipani, and he created it to scent his leather gloves. So when back in the day, you would use leather gloves to ride up and down the countryside on your horse. You'd come home and take them off and let them dry out. Well, after a day on the horse, they were stinky, smelly, and he vowed to create a scent to make them nice, to make them smell good. These leather gloves were very expensive. So he worked and he came across, he invented an oil, a perfumed oil, smelled of almonds. And after a day's ride, he would rub the oil onto the leather gloves and let them dry. The next day they'd be put on, they smelled delightful. And he sold it, and it became very, very, very popular throughout Europe for a couple of hundred years. And it was known as frangipani. So when the settlers came over to the New World and smelled the flower, it reminded them of home. Others claim the name is derived from the French word frangipaniere, which is kind of coagulated milk, and this describes its milky latex-like sap. Next. Plumerias do not produce many roots in relation to its size, so large specimens are easily transported. Cuttings are also easily carried from one location to another, and it's believed that priests, early settlers, and traders gathered trees and cuttings and spread them to the New World, throughout the New World. Today, they are found all over the world in tropical environments like Hawaii, Thailand, Australia, India, and even in our own gardens. Next. Plumerias are semi-evergreen, multi-trunk small trees with large, bold, dark green leaves and clusters of fragrant flowers. Leaves are arranged alternately and grow almost in whorls at the end of the branches. Plants like to grow in full sun in rich, well-draining soil. Next. There are many species and cultivars and hybrids, so the range of colors and fragrances seem endless. Individual blossoms are typically 5 petals. There are some with 3, 7, and sometimes even 6. And there's one variety that displays 6 on half of its blossoms. Most plumerias produce flowers on an inflorescence, which appear at the tip of a branch. The orange arrow is pointing to a thick stem that holds the inflorescence above the branch. It's called a peduncle. Next. As the buds grow, you can see the twisted pattern of the petals. This is a very exciting stage of a plumeria plant. If you have ever purchased a plumeria plant and didn't know the color of the flower, this is when you get very, very excited. Every day you go and check on it to see if the color has flushed. But most buds are green, and eventually they mature into a color. Next. There's often a band of red or rosy pink or pink on the reverse outer edge of the petals. Next. Some types of plumeria flowers do not open fully. They're referred to as shell, semi-shell, or even tulip-like. The blossoms on this inflorescence have opened fully with slightly recurved petals. This is a perfect photograph of an inflorescence. You can see the mature blossoms as well as the immature green blossoms and the different stages of the blossoms as they mature open. Next, stay there. Individual flowers are 2 to 4 inches across, and some are even 6 inches wide. Next. Blooms typically last only a day, but an inflorescence can produce dozens and dozens of blooms lasting weeks. This is typically what you will see after a blossom has finished its life cycle. It will float to the ground, and you'll have your ground scattered with beautiful petals. Next. There seem to be several basic color schemes for plumerias. It's white with a yellow center, like here, solid yellow, multicolored, pink, or red. There are even newer varieties that are lavender-covered petals. Next. Colors are variable. They depend on the amount of fertilization that a plant has received and also the amount of sunlight the plant has received. Next. This is one of my favorites. I wait for it all year to bloom. It's a rosy red with an orange center. It's very, very beautiful and very, very fragrant, but I don't know its name. Next. This inflorescence is displaying petals with a pretty pinwheel pattern. Next. Plumeria flowers have a stronger fragrance in the morning and in the evening hours. This is to attract its pollinator. It has a fainter scent in the middle of the day. Fragrances vary from a citrus, coconut, rose, cinnamon, honeysuckle, jasmine, gardenia, lemon, and even peaches. But some just describe the fragrance as sweetly floral. Next. This is Plumeria Jackie. She's a multicolored bloom. She has a solid yellow base, beautiful, beautiful yellow base. She's outlined in rosy red. Her petals are curled inward, and the petals end in a point. She's delightfully fragrant, and she is floriferous. She blooms nonstop from the second she gets outside that garage to the time that the cold winds blow in. Next. This is Plumeria Madame Pony. Her petals are twisted and curved, and she has a beautiful star-like pattern. She's beautifully fragrant too. Next. Not only are the flowers exotic looking, but so are the leaves. This is Plumeria Maya. She is a beautifully variegated plumeria. She's a compact grower with strong white on green variation in her leaves. The blooms are 1 inch, very kind of tiny, but a hot pink. And she's very special. She cannot be grown in full sun. She needs shade in the hottest part of the day. So from 12 to 5, she needs to be in part sun so that the sun will not burn her leaves. Next. This is a mature specimen that we found growing in Galveston. Plumerias can grow 30 feet tall, but it has to be in a perfect tropical environment without any winter harshness. Plumerias can grow, they tend to grow, the tops of them are rounded and wide, and they can even grow as wide as they are tall. Next. This is my garden, one of the many summers. I'm a ginger grower. I grow over 150 different kinds of gingers. But I use plumerias as an accent in my garden. I like to use them for height. Next. This is just a typical garden setting in my house. I use the plumerias for the height. It's almost a thriller, filler, and spiller formula. The thriller is, of course, the height of the plumerias. The fillers are hibiscus and gingers and palms and cycads. And then the spillers are the bougainvilleas, and in the center, there's even a firecracker fern. The white flowering plant in the background there as a filler is a Chilocosta speciosus. It's a kind of ginger, and it's ever blooming from spring through frost. Beautifully white ruffled flowers. Next. This is the entrance to our beer garden. Plumerias look gray around the pool. And this is just, I dot them throughout the landscape. And so that you'll have flowers on top, although this picture doesn't really show it well. The flowers are on top of the plumerias, the flowers are in the gingers, and the flowers are on the ground. As you walk into the beer garden, next, you can see the plumerias give it an intimate tropical setting. There's a blue arrow on top, and that's to show you that I often add plumerias in the background of the beer garden so that it kind of hides the glass greenhouse in the background. Next. Plumerias are at the edge of the garage here, and they are a wonderful bookend. They help to highlight the ornament that's in the middle of that garage. Next. Plumerias are a great accent. It's a wonderful entrance to a garden gate. And this on the right is Plumeria Jackie. She's the one I said that was so floriferous. And that's how many blooms she has, of course, on around July 4th. But even Memorial Day, she'll look like that. She's just a great bloomer. Next. This is how to plant how to plant plumerias in a garden. The first thing you need to do is gather your materials. I use an electric tiller. It's lightweight. My hand tools. I need a plumeria-specific fertilizer, compost, and then mulch as a top dressing. Next. You need 2 people to site a plumeria. You need one person to hold the plumeria in place and the other person to tell them to move it one way or another to get it just right. Next. To prepare a bed, and this is a bed with flowers around, companion plants around the plumeria. I take compost and I layer it all around the area. Then I take microlife and sprinkle it around, and then I till it in lightly. Then I add the top photo. Then I add bone meal and a plumeria-specific fertilizer. Bone meal is very important. It is a long-acting phosphorus, and phosphorus is that middle number on a fertilizer. It helps to promote blooming. Then to plant the hole, you can plant it with a shovel, but I enjoy the tiller, so I actually till the hole. Next. Now the top left shows the plumeria. And you have to plant the plumeria at the location, at the exact level that it was grown in a container or that it was grown last year. You cannot plant the plumeria too deeply. The soil will connect with the stem of the plant and it can cause rot. So always keep it at the same soil level. Then using 1 inch by 2 inch by 36-inch wooden stakes, I hammer the stakes around, or actually my husband hammers the stakes around the base of the plumeria. For most plumerias, it only takes 3 stakes, but 4 stakes, it's pretty sturdy too. But if you're not used to doing stakes around the plant, you can even use up to 5. Just make sure it's a strong, sturdy support. Next. The staking technique was taught to us by the great plumeria grower Emerson Willis and his lovely, lovely wife Nancy in LaPorte, Texas. Previously, we had only grown plumerias tethered to a fence, and even then it was wonky, it was wobbly. But this technique allowed us to put plumerias front and center anywhere we wanted to in the garden. If you do not stake your plumeria, they will fall. They'll fall in a storm, they'll fall on a rainy day, they'll fall if the ground gets too wet. So the staking really does help it stay and support it. If you do not stake it, they'll fall over and you can have a branch break off, and then it'll ruin the beautiful symmetry of the branches. Next. This is just the end of it when you're actually planting the companion plants. I've already planted the 1 gallons, and then I mulch everything. Then after you mulch, then I put in my 4-inch pots. It's really hard to plant 4-inch pots and mulch around it. This is a much easier way. Next. This is the finished product. This is the plumeria and then the companion plantings. It's a very welcoming sight, especially as you drive up the driveway. Next. Are there any questions so far?
Hi, so yes, there are. And first, apologies to everybody. We are having some audio issues, and we're doing our best to kind of fix it in the background. I don't know. We're trying to do the very best that we can, but we do have a lot of questions. So I'll start. Let's see. Where is the top of our questions? Can they be grown indoors at all? So can you grow these?
Absolutely, absolutely. You will need. That's a fun question. Because nowadays they're trying all sorts of indoor plants. You need to put it in a bright sunny window. You might have to put a heating lamp on it in the wintertime. It's just a bright sunny window. It needs sunlight. If you don't have a bright sunny light, you give it an extra light for it to bloom properly.
Perfect. And then another question, this is interesting. Why do plumerias bloom some years and not others? Yeah, so why do some bloom some years and not others?
Well, it depends on the tip. First,
Mm-hmm.
fertilize. We'll get to that later. And sometimes they'll bloom, and then after that they'll branch, and then that branch needs to mature before it can bloom again.
Got it. And they also asked about planting cuttings, and I know that we're getting into that later on because I snuck a peek at the later PowerPoint slides. So perfect. We'll do a couple more, and then we'll move on. I think. Does Maya do well in a greenhouse?
Oh yes, absolutely. You need Maya in a greenhouse, actually, for the wintertime.
Perfect. And are all of yours in pots or planted in the ground? And I know we've seen some planted. Have we shown potted ones yet too already?
Yeah, we're about to talk about container grown plants.
Perfect.
I do absolutely both.
Excellent. So great questions, and you're all right on point because we're about to get to that. So apologies for the sound for everybody. We're going to do our best to continue trying to fix it on our end here.
What's wrong with the sound?
It's getting a little bit of a buzz. I don't know if are you on your laptop? If you can maybe try moving the laptop a little bit, that might help. Yeah. See, did that help at all? No. Well, we're going to keep trying on, see if there's anything we can do on our side.
Okay.
And then I'll be back for more questions. So please continue to ask questions.
Wait. Does that work?
No, it's still there. We're gonna see what we can do. So go ahead and keep on going, and we'll get to more questions in a little bit.
Okay.
Perfect.
These are instructions on planting a plumeria in a container. First, gather all your materials together. I create my own plumeria soilless mix because there is no mix. There's no bag soilless. There's no bag potting soil for specifically for Plumerias. So I make my own. This is just a recipe. You can variable as you wish. I use 35% mushroom compost, 35% leaf mold compost, some 25% potting mix. I use Miracle Grow here. There's 5% perlite and about a cup of bone meal. I mix it all in. And of course, you'll still need mulch for I like to use pine bark mulch, not any dyed mulch, because that dye is going to be absorbed in the soil. Pine bark mulch as a top dressing. I like to use the Plumeria specific fertilizer for as I fill the pot up with soil, I'll add the Plumeria fertilizer. Next. It is infinitely easier to finish this project at the location where the container will be displayed. Super easy. You don't want to move it after it's been planted. After removing the Plumeria from the container, rough up the sides, and that way it allows more fresh soil to be put in the pot. Make sure, again, you place the Plumeria at the exact height that it was grown in the container. You don't want to plant it too deeply. If you plant it too high, then you have exposed roots, so that's not good either. And it takes a lot of practice. Next. It's a typical thriller, filler, and spiller formula. The Plumeria is the thriller because of the height. The filler are pink pentas, and the spiller are a really nice spiller, a trailing pink Dinka periwinkle. It's a pink theme. The photo in the middle shows the Plumerias are a soft pink with a yellow center, and it was just nice companion planting. The concern is that's a fairly small pot, but since the Plumerias are heavy feeders and I feed them monthly, then the bedding plants will not compete for nutrition. Next. This is the finished product. It'll sit there in that corner until I bring it in around Thanksgiving. This is the saucer at the bottom, at the base of the pot is a point of discussion among Plumeria growers. A lot do not like to keep pots do not like to have pots placed inside a saucer because they worry that when you water, that the water will keep in the saucer and it might cause root rot. I've done this for years, and I've grown Plumerias for 35 years, and this is just a winner. When you water that Plumeria, you're going to water from the top and you're going to water thoroughly. The saucer will catch that water so that that water will be available to that plant as it needs it in the next couple of days. When the saucer is empty and the soil feels dry, you water it again. It's a wonderful time saver. I'm actually going to take that saucer out this week and put in a bigger saucer, a wider saucer. And it works very, very well. It keeps you from watering every day. Next. These are the two basic fertilizers. You have a Plumeria specific fertilizer in a granular form on the left. On the right, it is a water-soluble powder. The Plumerias are very heavy feeders. They require low nitrogen, high phosphorus, and balanced potassium and trace elements. For a Plumeria specific fertilizer, those trace elements are important. Our soil do not have the trace elements that Plumerias need to have a balanced nutrition. If you put in too much nitrogen, if it's a high nitrogen fertilizer, you're going to have lots of beautiful green leaves, but not a lot of flowers. You need to feed at least once a month if you want to have bountiful blooms. If you have the big question is, why doesn't my Plumeria bloom? It's because you're not fertilizing it enough. The fertilizer on the left, the granular, is the same fertilizer I use when I plant a Plumeria in the ground or when I plant the Plumeria in a container. That's the first month. The next month, I might change it up. I might give it some liquid fertilizer. The reason is a granular fertilizer, you need to water the soil, especially in a container. You need to water the soil first, spread the granular fertilizer around the plant, and then water it again thoroughly. Never place fertilizer next to the stem or trunk of a plumeria. It'll cause it to burn. Always sprinkle it around it. In a soil, in a garden setting, you can put it 10 inches out from the stem. In the container, you just put it on the edge of the stem, edge of the container, and then water it in. Whereas the water-soluble fertilizer, which has a super high middle number, it is, you dissolve it in water, and you can just water it in. You can actually fertilize it as you pour the gallon container into the pot. So it's really easy. I change it up. Some months I'll use the granular, some months I'll use the water-soluble fertilizer. Next. Plumerias are very hardy. They are not susceptible to pests and diseases, but these are the only two. I only have yellow leaves. I have never had the bottom problem. But the photograph at the top is a yellowing plumeria leaf. In the heat of the summer, usually in August, it's a common problem. Plumeria leaves start to turn yellow and fall off. This is due to a magnesium deficiency. Magnesium is an indispensable element in photosynthesis. It helps to capture the sun's energy and give the leaf its green color. A quick remedy is to apply Epsom salts around the plant base. Make sure you never put the Epsom salt next to the stem or the trunk, because it will burn the tissue. Always put it out in a container. You can put it on the edge of the container, and the ground, you put it at 10 inches out from the base. And that way the roots will absorb it. Make sure you water it in real well. The roots will absorb the Epsom salt, the magnesium, transport it up to the leaves, and they'll start to green very quickly. This is usually due to you haven't been on a regular fertilization schedule, or it's rained a lot. That'll do it. The bottom photograph is rust. I've never had rust, but some of my friends have. And it usually occurs in late fall. It is an orange powdery bump on the underside of the leaves. It's caused by a fungus. The spores are airborne and can spread from plant to plant from a sprinkler or just from rain. So what you need to do, the Plumeria Society of America recommends using a broad spectrum fungicide, but you need to remove all the infected leaves. That means remove all the infected leaves on the plant, pop it off, and all the leaves on the ground. Pick them up, and any of the soil that the rust has actually touched, remove the soil. Hopefully it's mulched, but just remove that and throw it away. Do not compost it. Next. This is the season is winding down. In late summer, you stop fertilizing. Fertilizing creates new growth, new blooms, and you want your plant to wind down like the season has. These are photos showing what a little freeze damage will do to the leaves. Freeze damage in this case is 34 degrees. Anything 32 and below will cause stem damage. Next. Now it's time, it's the end of the season, and we need to store plumerias. The number one cause of death in our area is freeze, it's a frost. These are tropical plants. They cannot take heavy freezes. This is a stalk. This is the end of the season. We had some cold fronts or cool fronts. And the cool fronts is an indication to the plumeria to go into dormancy. So they drop their leaves. We actually dig this up, move it, get a shovel, a nice sharpshooter, and I take the shovel around the plant at least 18 inches out, and then lift it, bag the soil that is attached to the roots, bag it. And as something of this size, we typically have a heavy-duty tarp that we got from the Academy. We put the root ball on the tarp and we drag it to the garage. And the other picture is 1 year in our garage. We actually put the plumerias that are in pots, we store them in the garage, and we add a heating lamp to the garage to help it stay a little bit warm. I've used closets. In fact, my husband, for the first 10 years of our marriage, considered plumerias closet trees. You can use indoor closets. You can use your garage. You can use a greenhouse or any other storage facility. Leave the plant. I like to leave the leaves onto the plant. I let them desiccate naturally. They fall off naturally. 1 year, I had the wild idea to just pop off all the leaves before I stored them. Well, bacteria got into that wound, and I had limb damage. And, the limbs actually died back to the trunk. It was terrible. So after that, I always left the leaves on the plants. I've never had a problem since. There's a saying that you store the trees by Thanksgiving and you take them out at Easter. That's a really good rule of thumb. Next. This is Mercer Botanic Gardens. The photo on the left is it's an empty conference room. Hurricane Harvey kind of damaged it. And so they lift the plumerias out of the ground, they bag them, and they store them here, leaving the leaves to desiccate and fall off naturally. The photo on the right is the plumeria greenhouse on our propagation complex. And these are kept immaculately clean all winter. See, there's no leaves down there. And they're in a lightly heated greenhouse. Next. This year, we had a construction crew here for many months, remodeling our kitchen and bathrooms. And so our garage was full of construction gear. And so this was it was a terrible ordeal. So I had to find a way to keep the plumerias safe, and I made a winter bed. I put frost cloth down on the ground, 2 layers. Never, ever, ever put a plumeria directly on cold concrete. They need a barrier. They need something that's nice and warm. Remember, this is a bed. They're going to sleep. So put 2 layers of frost cloth down. Then we actually put 8 layers of frost cloth on top. We have miles of frost cloth from years of doing this. So we put 8 layers of frost cloth on top. And then eventually I put a plastic tarp on top of that. And it was a nice warm bed. Next. This is what it looked like at the end. You can see fall's come. This is about the 1st of December. And so we made a nice bed. We made sure that the frost cloth was not going to be blown up by some wind. So those are weights. And we left them there, hoping for the best. Next. Until February 14th. And that's when the deep freeze came. As you can see on the left, it was 17 degrees outside. And when I came out, this is what I found. The umbrella had tipped over from the amount of ice and snow, and the frost cloth was full of snow, and I was just worried sick. I'm like, oh no, what happened? The greenhouse in the back there, we kept our electricity on, but because it's glass and it even had 3 heat lamps and a fan to distribute the heat throughout the glass house, it got down to 28 degrees. And I lost a lot in the greenhouse. Next. But so in late March, with great trepidation, and I mean this, we pulled back. I mean, I was just so scared. I just thought, I've lost my whole collection. I pulled back the frost cloth 1 layer at a time. My husband and I did it, and he kept looking at my face saying, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And so I laid it back, and sure enough, they were fine. They were in their winter bed. They had started to sprout some green leaves. They were fine. The only injury we had was one on the outer layer. This is the branch. This is the frost damage, and it died all the way back to its main stem. That's the only damage we had. I will not use this as a regular winter routine. I'd much rather have them safe in the garage. But this is a nice thing to know in case there's an emergency. Next. This is what frost damage looks like. This particular plant was by the garage where there's a crack in it, and a crack in the garage door, and it got nipped. And this, the tips especially, that's how they look. They get black and mushy. The big mistake people make is to cut off the mush. Don't do it. If you cut it off where you think it should be cut off, the plumeria might die back a little bit further. Let the plumeria decide where it wants to grow back. There, as you can see, it's decided to make a new whorl of branches, and the plumeria will actually grow down, 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 and it will decide where it wants to start new growth. It will decide where it wants to stop the rot. And eventually that will desiccate, fall off naturally. It'll scab naturally, and the plumeria plant will look very, very nice. Don't you cut it off. Let the plumeria take care of it. Now, are there any questions about winter overwintering?
Yeah, we did have a few questions, and let me go back and go back up to the top here. Let's see. So the first question was specifically, how did your plants do during the freeze? And I think you answered that pretty well.
Yeah.
Looks like they mostly survived.
But I had a plumeria in the greenhouse
Mhm.
and Plumeria obtusa, and it died.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Funny enough,
So maybe outside was the
it
solution.
was better.
Yeah. So this question comes from Laura. My biggest problem is that they have grown out so much that the tops are getting heavy. What can I do other than trying to tying them off to keep them from breaking? So what can we do for those that are growing out too
Well,
much?
just the next section will be about how to take off cuttings. And so the
Perfect.
best thing to do is cut off, and you'll find this. You'll find the instructions perfect.
Perfect. Okay. And we have a question from Chris asking if Epsom salts work on all kinds of plants. And I'm assuming he's also specifically meaning plumerias.
Oh no, absolutely, absolutely. In August, you will see plants that have yellow leaves. It's probably from too much rain or not enough fertilization. That includes gingers, plumerias, roses, all sorts of plants. Please use Epsom salts, but remember, never put Epsom salts at the base of the plant. Always spread it out about 10 inches.
Perfect.
And water it in. Water it in.
Excellent. So Nancy said she stored hers in the garage during winter, and Nancy, I hope that they survived. I know it was definitely a cold February for a few days, and Chris was asking, yeah, the snow cover actually helped, right, with your plumerias, which it did. One just came in from Mary Jane. How many plumeria trees do you personally have, and how long have you been growing them? I think that's a great question.
Oh, actually, I have been growing plumerias for 35 years.
Wow.
And I have not counted, 30, 35, 40.
Mm-hmm.
1 year, I was ill. I was really ill, and I didn't even know it was going to get cold. I lost my entire collection.
Oh,
Lost the
wow.
whole thing. A tree that I had 20 years. It was as big around as a man's thigh.
Wow.
It was just, I couldn't get out. I didn't even know it was going to get cold. And but I lost it, but then it grows back. You can take, there are sometimes the roots will start to grow, sprouts, or you can buy another plant, but always winter them. That's the big question. You don't lose a plant in the summer, you lose the plant in the winter.
Got it. Well, that looks like our questions for right now. Oh, and Nancy
Okay.
said, yes, her plants did survive in the garage. Excellent. Glad
Oh,
to
you
hear
can also add a heat lamp to a garage. That helps a lot, or a couple of them.
Got it. Perfect. Heat lamps will definitely be helpful. So let's go ahead and keep going. But thank you, everybody, so much for the questions. They are fantastic. I know I'm learning a lot, and I can't wait to see what the next parts are. So let's keep on going.
Oh, there's a section missing here. Oh, too bad. There are 3 slides that are missing. But okay. This is propagation by stem cuttings. Too bad. This is propagation by stem cuttings. You need to select a healthy stem and cut with a clean pair of clippers. And that means you need to take an alcohol swab and wipe both sides of the clipper blades, because you can transport a disease from one plumeria to another. This really is an important factor whenever you start clipping plants back. Always clean, always clean, always clean. Stem cuttings are usually 12 to 15. Stem cuttings are usually 12 to 15 inches in length, but they can be taller. And if they're taller cuttings, then you need to stake them. Collect a mature, firm stem. The best time for taking cuttings is in the springtime when the soil and the air temperatures are warm. Next. Because this particular stem cutting had an inflorescence on it, you have to cut away the inflorescence. This cutting doesn't have any roots yet, so it needs to only be able to support a little bit of growth. So only leave 1 or 2 leaves on that cutting. The white milky sap will help heal the wounds that you created by removing the inflorescence and the leaves. Next. This is a technique that we learned from Galveston County Master Gardener Loretta Osteen. This is a technique using paraffin wax to help heal the wound caused by a clipper. Sometimes, if you've ever created a lot of stem cuttings, sometimes you will get the bottom of the stem cutting has rotted and you've lost your cutting. This is a surefire way to cure it. Now, you do not have to use this. You can just let the cutting heal for like 2 or 3 days and then plant it. But we like using this. It's very helpful to us when we take cuttings. We melt the paraffin into, which you can buy on Amazon. You melt the paraffin into a small crock pot. And the small crock pot is usually used for hors d'oeuvres or something at Christmas time and Thanksgiving. And we just have a designated crock pot for this purpose. You melt the paraffin into the slow cooker, and you don't want it boiling hot. You just want it lukewarm. And that white glob at the bottom is unmelted paraffin. Next. Now this is the cutting. You make sure that that cutting is smooth, not rough, and it has dripping milky sap. You can let this heal for a day, or you can use it right away. We decided just to use it right away. You dip the cutting into the slightly melted wax, and you gently twirl it. You only want to cover about 1 inch of the cutting with the wax. The paraffin at the bottom, do not touch it with that because it's not melted yet. Next. They're pulled stem cutting out, and this is what it looks like. It's just a perfect seal. Next. Now, usually you don't dip a cutting into a bottle of rooting hormone, but I think Brandon was a little in rush over this. This was the one holding the Plumeria cutting is Brandon Hubbard. He's our greenhouse manager. He swirled the cutting into a rooting hormone. This is hormone number 2. You can use hormone number 1. You can use any kind of rooting hormone. It's very beneficial when you have a stem cutting. When you want to promote roots, put in a rooting hormone. He's pointing to the powder. The powder doesn't work up a stem. Plumerias do not root up the stem. Plumerias only root at the base of the plant. Now you're thinking, that's quite a seal. How is the plumeria going to break that seal? This is a very thin layer of wax. And eventually the plumeria will just start naturally to start producing roots. And they'll break through that wax because it's a very light layer. And then that rooting hormone will help kick in, and the roots will start to absorb it and create more roots. Next. You need a very light mix, a very fluffy, porous mix for a stem cutting. You want a porous mix for lots of air pockets so that those roots can break through and grow. Fill a 1 gallon pot. This is a potting mix with about 80% perlite, 20% peat mix. Make a hole in the center of the pot with your finger or a large dibble, and then gently place that cutting into the mix. You don't want to disturb the rooting hormone. Next. Pack it down. You've got that stem in there. Now you pack that soil in around the cutting. You want to make sure that it is not toppled over. If you have a dog or if you have children, you have a very active life, you can sometimes put rocks around that stem cutting so that the stem doesn't move. If the stem moves, even if it's in a porous mix, it might break off the delicate roots. New roots are super delicate. But the older the roots, the more hardy, the stronger they become. Next, after it's been planted, you water it in well. You will not water it again until you see active leaf growth, and then water thereafter. To see if a cutting has rooted, which takes over a month, easily 6 weeks for it to really root in. To see if it's rooted, give it a gentle tug, move it to the side. If you feel a resistance, then you know it's rooted. If it's wobbly, then you know it hasn't, and it just needs a little bit longer. Do not put these in full sun. If you're going to grow this outside on your patio, give it a little shade. They do better in filtered sun for them to grow roots as a baby. Consider these babies. Next. This is a very interesting photograph. It shows 2 different kinds of cuttings, stem cuttings. The cutting on the left, please note that these are rocks because I've got cats, dogs. I always want to make sure that they are not wobbled, that they have support. The plant on the left is a cutting from the terminal tip of a plumeria branch. That is the terminal tip, the outer edge of the branch. and it has, that's where usually the inflorescence appears. And this cutting will grow vertical. It will grow vertical until it blooms. After plumeria blooms, it then branches. So this will actually branch after it blooms. The plant on the right was taken in the middle of a branch. It has two cuts, one in the front, one in the back. So when you plant that, it's immediately going to branch out. So these will be two different ways that plumeria grows. Next. This is a different technique of how to do stem cuttings. This is excellent for children because it's a clear container and you get to see the fluffy white roots as they grow. It's very interesting. You take a clear plastic cup and the lid that goes over it for the straw, and you make sure that your cutting is smooth. For instance, if you've cut with clippers, sometimes it's a ragged cut. You need to cut it with a knife to make sure it's smooth. The roots appear or grow easier and better when it's a nice smooth cut. Next. Now you have to make drainage holes in the cup. You can make drainage holes with a soldering tool, or you can even use a long incense stick. Just light the incense stick, poke it in the glass, and it melts the plastic. The drainage holes are evenly spaced, 1/3 around the 1/3 bottom and also the bottom of the plant. Fill in the soil to about 1/3. Insert your plumeria cutting gently, and also you put a rooting hormone on that cutting. Next, you take the lid and you take some scissors and you cut an X where the straw usually fits in, and then you curl that hole back gently. I forgot to say, you need to fill up the cutting with a little bit more dirt, a little bit more soilless mix. Make sure that mix is very light and perlite, very perlite, because you want the roots to grow in a very porous medium. All right, you take the lid and you gently put it over the cutting and you snap it in place. This lid will help the plant not move so much, so it doesn't break any roots. Then you can put the cup and the stem cutting underneath grow lights on a heating mat, or you can put it in a sunny window. Next. You can also grow plumerias from seeds. This is a fun experiment. The seed pod of a plumeria is a T-shaped twin capsule. It emerges green, small little green pods, and then it'll grow longer and gets a dark brown. When it's mature, it usually takes 8 to 9 months for a seed pod to mature. It bursts open, just pops. And then you get to see how the seeds are arranged inside that seed pod. They're actually attached to the seed pod with a thin, papery membrane. On the bottom right photo is a seed. The top part is a dry, papery wing. This wing helps the seeds fly away from the parent plant. The bottom part of that is the actual seed. And the very tip of that seed is where the root will emerge. Next. This is it's an incubator for seed pods, for seeds actually. It is a clean, super clean chicken rotisserie container. The tool that I used to make the holes was a stencil cutter. You could also use a soldering iron, soldering tool, or even a hot glue gun. Without the glue, it works. It'll melt the plastic. You make the holes evenly around the container and on the bottom. Next. This technique was taught to me by Alan Raymond. He's a great plumeria grower and a very talented gardener. He likes to create a special soilless mix of screened pine bark, perlite, expanded shale, and compost. But really, any soilless mix will do. Just make sure it's fluffy with lots and lots of perlite. And you put it into your container, and then you moisten it. You can moisten it before you put it in. It doesn't matter. Just make sure it's moistened, because you're not going to water that until the plants actively grow. This is the seed pod with a few of the seeds taken off. And you plant the seeds wingtip up, because the bottom of that seed is the actual plant. Next. I cover the rotisserie container with a clean domed lid, and you can put many lines of plumeria seeds in them. You cover it tight. You can place it in a sunny window, or you can put it under a grow light on a heating pad like here, and then wait. Do not water it again until you see the seeds actively grow with their first set of true leaves. What you will see is you'll see these lines and lines of paper things, and you'll see a little green nubbin showing above the soil. And it's fun to watch, and children love it too, because it's just a little incubator. And when the seeds start to actually grow its first set of true leaves, then you can take the dome and carefully water it in and put the dome back. Not until the seedlings reach the top of that dome do you remove the dome, and then let them grow for a little bit, and then take the seedlings and you can plant them in clean 4-inch pots. Let them get settled, and then fertilize weekly with a half-strength fertilizer. Next. These are really kind of cool things because both of these are yearlings or year-old seedlings. In a typical garden setting, only one plumeria plant is known, the one actually carrying the seed pod, and yet there's a lot of variability in that seed pod. Of those 50 seeds, you can have different colored flowers, different kind of fragrances, different shape of flowers, and in this case, the way the stem grows. Normally, a yearling or a young plumeria seed grows straight up. This one, out of 50 seeds, there are about 12 to 15 seedlings that branched early, like the one on the right. They came from the exact same seed pod, but it's just the variability of the seeds. And so because of the very interesting branching, I decided to put it in a little bonsai pot to see if we can bonsai it. It takes 3 to 4 years for a seed to mature into a flowering plant. Next. Are there any questions so far about propagation?
Let's see what we've got. We've got a couple more questions. It goes back to winter again, it looks like.
Sure.
So we have a very large plumeria tree that's been in the ground for at least 10 plus years.
Oh, wow.
The two trunks are easily 7 to 9 inches in diameter.
Sure.
It grows back to the ground, but has new growth appearing from the bottom of these stumps. Should this mature plant be dug up in the winter?
I lost the question.
Oh, should they dig this plant up that's been in the ground for 10 plus years?
It looks as if you lose it every year. So I don't think you're going to get very many blooms off of it. So
Okay.
I would dig it up. I would dig it up and let it mature into a tree. Yeah.
Okay. And then what is the best time to root cuttings?
Now is the absolute best time because in the springtime and early summer, the air temperature is warm, the soil temperatures are warm, and it gives that cutting a chance to root and grow, and it gives a chance to the plumeria tree to heal. So now is a great time.
Perfect. And one more, and this is about cuttings. Is it true that you get to name the plumeria that you grew from seed?
Well, yes, you do. In fact, if you go to the Plumerias Society of America, they actually have a form that you fill out. But unfortunately, you may have a yellow center pink flower, but somebody else has had the same thing and named it first. So it depends if it's very similar to something else that's been named.
Well, I didn't even know you got to name the plant, so that sounds wonderful.
Oh, yes!
That's very neat. So that's great. That's what we've got for now. I just have a reply from, let's see, from Julie, who had that large plant that it is blooming beautifully. So that's the large 10-year tree that is blooming. And then
good. How tall? Do you know how tall it is?
Julie, if you got a chance to let me know how tall the tree is.
And how did she protect it? How did she protect it this past winter?
Yeah, if you want to type that in the comments in the chat, we can pass that along. I think we've got Seal's interest in your
really.
No answer just yet. Maybe she'll be able to type in an answer in a minute, and so we can get to her towards the end of the presentation. So thank you guys. Keep asking questions, and I think we've got one more round to go, and then we'll do our final questions at the end.
Okay.
So let's keep on moving on.
All right, this is Plumerias can be found at local sales. This was the Mercer Botanic Garden sale this past May. Mercer has many plant sales throughout the year, and we sell Plumerias. This is a table with the yearlings, the year-old seedlings on the left, which are priced at $4, and then the cuttings, variable cuttings, some branched, some weren't, and then the background are mature trees. You can often find plumerias at sale at local church garden sales or local garden club sales. The Plumeria Society of America has super great, fabulous sales in June and July. There's one in the middle of July, and you can go and see the exact date on their website. They will have named varieties. They will have cuttings that can tell you exactly what color the flower will be. You can buy mature plants, and you will have an array of experts. When you go into that convention center, you will be inundated with the exotic fragrance of plumerias, the wonderful people chatting all about plumerias, and you get to see the different colors that plumerias can grow into. It's stunning. They even have vases that you can buy just for plumerias. It's fun to grow. But if you can't get to the sale, you can also buy a plumeria online. There's Jungle Jack Plumeria. He's out of California. He grows his stuff either in Thailand or Hawaii, and he ships them over here. He will sell you rooted cuttings. They are named varieties. From his website, you can pick the exact color that you want, and his business is very, very, very good because his product is very good. He's very careful, and he ships his cuttings superbly. That's one way of doing it. Next. Now, to learn about plumerias, because you can grow them for 30 years and you still don't know everything about them. So you can go these big books. These are just the 3 books on top are broad books. They will tell you a little bit about plumeria, about where they came from, the different species, but they don't give you the exact culture that you need to grow them in your garden. The handbook on the right-hand side, the Handbook of Plumeria Culture, is written by Richard and Mary Helen Eggenberger. It is an excellent little handbook. It's very brief. It can tell you how to air layer. It can tell you how to graft, how to overwinter. It can tell you how to hybridize, do your own hybridization. It's a fun handbook. It gives you exact information that you will need to grow plumerias in your garden. They're generous with their information, and they write helpful and funny anecdotes. Next. That's it. Thank you for supporting Harris County Master Gardeners. To learn more about our lectures, farmer markets, plant sales, and horticulture workshops, visit these 2 websites. That's it.
That was perfect. Excellent timing. And we did hear back from, oh, great. There's a fire alarm in my building. So I'm going to cut us off pretty quickly now. At least we're done. Thank you all for joining. I'm sure it's just a drill, but we will see you next month for our next program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay, I have to run because there's a fire alarm. So I'm so sorry.
Perfect timing, Brian.
At least we finished. So I will get on Facebook or email in a bit and chat with you guys. I got to run.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.